Ciao a tutti. Can you hear me? I just used up half of my Italian budget for today, so I hope you can hear me. Hello, I'm István from Circuit. I'm a staff Android engineer and also a co-organizer of the Android Budapest meetup group. And today, as introduced, I will be talking about tips and tricks to improve your Compose previews. Before we start, here's a QR code. If you want to scan it, you can. I think I have to dock for it, but yeah, if you can find these slides without animations on my site. So if you're sensitive to animations or you just want to follow along in your own pace, here's the thing to do, to scan. And I'll wait for a couple of seconds then. Are you all Android developers here, or at least mobile? Who is not? Okay, probably that's a better question. Okay, most of us are Android devs or mobile devs. That's cool. Okay, everyone is scanned, I guess, because I see no phones in the air. Cool. So then, let's start with some food for thought. I promise you this will be the only XML you will see today, but to actually comprehend what we have today, sometimes we have to look back a bit. And we're talking about previews. So when we created something in XML, like 3 years before, in Android Studio, we just wrote the XML, and pretty much instantly, if that XML was correct, then it got rendered on the left side or right side, whatever, in the preview pane. And we could easily preview our XMLs. We got that out of the box, so that was kind of convenient. We didn't have to do too much things to actually have that. And then Compose came, and if we wrote the same simple list item composable, and we opened the preview pane on the right, we get that message, like no previews found. So that means we have to do some extra legwork to have previews for composables. Probably we all know that, right? So we have to write something like this to get something like this, which is, for this, quite simple composable. It's kind of straightforward, just a preview annotation slapped on another composable function, do our thing in it, call the theme, call the composable, and that's it. We got this nice little preview rendered. It wasn't that easy in the beginning, of course, when this preview tooling was quite young in Android Studio, but nowadays, it's, kind of stable, right? Most of the time, let's say. Okay, but the thing is, we had to do something. We had to write code. We had to write actual code to get that preview. And we had to write code that will hopefully never reach production, but still we have to work with it. So we have to take that into consideration. We have to do work that will probably never be shipped, like hopefully, right? If you have R8 enabled and you don't call these preview composables anywhere else in your code explicitly, then those will be just deleted from your production code base. So, or the resulting artifact. So at least that's something. But this is also code that others will read. So if you write something here, you have to do it in a quality that other people will understand, your peers, your next colleagues, probably later you. So if this code is too complicated, too complex, then you might have done something wrong if you don't understand it a couple of weeks, days, whatever later. Also, it's code, so it needs to be maintained. It will be there in your code base. People need to review it when it gets into your code base. So again, this is code that needs work. Also, this code might be duplicated. So if you write something stupid there or something really exotic, that might be duplicated by future developers, or even you, if you have the tendency to do that. And also, this is code that we might use for other purposes, like generating a showcase from the previews, or UI testing, or so on and so forth. There are a lot of things. We'll touch on that later. With that out of the way, I'll talk a bit about what I'll be talking about. So what we'll touch here in this talk will be some developer experience related things, limitations of the preview annotations in both Jetpack Compose and its tooling, and Compose multi-platform and its tooling. Also custom tooling that we can write to make our composables better to understand and better to write. And we'll also touch on interactive previews. Also, as I said, I'll be talking about Jetpack Compose and its designated tooling Android Studio, but also Compose Multi-Platform and its designated tooling, currently Fleet. So with that, let's start with the first tip and trick. First of all, a really easy thing. If we're writing previews for our composables, we should consider IDE themes. Why is that? Well, sorry for the white background. It will fade away in a couple of seconds. So let's say here's this code that someone wrote, one of our colleagues, let's say, who prefers using the bright theme of Android Studio or IntelliJ IDEA. And they wrote this, and they just wrote this row, added some stuff there. But the thing is, because they're implementing a list item, they didn't really add an explicit background here to the list item, because list items will be displayed inside the list. The list should, in most cases, provide the background for the list item. So they write the preview for this list item, and it looks like that. Really simple. It's black text, black icon, and a white background. Pretty much that's all. Looks good. They commit it to the repository, push it, someone reviews it, it gets in. Then another colleague wants to check out this code, and they prefer the dark theme. So let's switch to the dark theme. Your eyes can relax now. And the same code, the same preview renders that on the right. So what's happening here? Because the IDE theme, the background of the preview is depending on the IDE theme, then here, in this case, we get this dark text on a dark background, which is not a great developer experience, especially if you have multiple hues of dark shades on that UI element, like secondary texts or whatnot, grayed out icons, and so on and so forth. This can get really comfortable to view. What we can do with this situation? Well, we can start using preview annotation parameters that are there. There are a lot. We'll touch on some of them. There is this one called show background, and if we set it to true, we instantly get this. By default, the preview tooling renders every preview with the white background. It's coming from internal configuration, but by default, it's white, or a shade of white, and we get this. And instantly, with one line of change, this is pretty much accessible to anyone who's using any theme in their IDEs. Great. So let's see some more annotation parameters, because, as I said, there are a couple of those. Let's get back to our example, and let's add some customization here. We can specify the actual background color here. So it should have changed. The projector might not give it back properly, but this is another color. It's not pure white anymore. It's actually color from the circuit apps and our design language. So it's in production, but it's not white, but it's not that visible either. But it's there. That's a custom value. The thing is that because preview is an annotation, all parameters passed to the preview must be compile time constants, like the Boolean true or like a hexadecimal color value. And because of that, well, I don't know about you, but I don't have a hexadecimal color converter in my brain, so that's quite hard to understand, right? So what we can do with this, we can comment on it. This is a color copied from our color system. It's the gray.w500 or whatever. Still, not a good solution. If you change that color value up or you just delete gray.w500, this might not be valid anymore, but it's a thing that we can do. A better thing that we can do is use one of our already defined compile time constants from our color system. Probably everyone has this or these color definitions in their project, so we can just reuse them in our preview backgrounds or in the preview annotation parameters. Great if you have these. If you create a new Jetpack Compose or Compose multi-platform project, these are there, so you can use them. And those have proper names, usually, so again, it yields a better readability. OK, so what happens if we switch if we define the UI mode to be dark mode, because we want dark mode previews? Well, that color, the gray W500, stays the same. So the background is still the same, but the UI switches to dark mode. And as it turns out, this list item properly supports dark mode, so it renders its text and the icon color, so the foreground color, in white. So now we have white on a whitish background. Again, that's not a great thing. What we can do here, of course, is to introduce another preview, because we can do that. We can slap multiple preview annotations on the composable previews, and we can define separate parameters for them. So the first one stays the same. The second one becomes our dark mode preview. We add a dark gray color there, which should be our dark mode background, and we set the UI mode flag on this to dark. And now we have two previews. Awesome. We write more and more code to achieve pretty simple things like that, but we will see how we can tackle that as well, so that we don't have to duplicate this all over our code. So about the parameters. We have this android-x.compose tooling library, which we can use with Jetpack Compose and Android Studio. And Android Studio does understand most of those things, let's say all. So we have this preview annotation from that library. Android Studio supports these parameters that I've just shown you perfectly fine. But the thing is, there is a copy of this preview annotation in the JetBrains implementation of Compose multi-platform, which doesn't have any preview annotation parameters, and also because of that, the tooling doesn't support them either. So unfortunately, if you're writing shared Compose multi-platform code, then we don't have this luxury of having these parameters being able to set on the preview annotation. It's unfortunate. The JetBrains people are actually working on this. The next tip, group your previews. Let's get back to our previous example. There is a preview composable with the list item, and we've done two previews again. Those are the same, we just have more parameters set on them. We have a name and a group for each of the previews, and those are aptly named. Light primary and dark primary, meaning that this will be the primary background in light mode, the second and the primary background in the dark mode. And we set the group to be the same here, same strings. These can be constants, of course, so that we group together these previews. We do this the same way with the secondary variants of the background colors, because why not in this example? And if we slap these four preview annotations on top of this preview composable, we get those four previews easily rendered. Of course, more and more code is being added there, but stay with me. And also, those in pairs are different background colors, primary and secondary. We just, in the circuit app, we just have really close colors of these kinds. But the good thing with this, why we've done that, is that if you have a lot of such previews in your preview list, let's say, then Android Studio provides this grouping functionality that you can filter out your composable previews with. So if you're adding really, really a lot of previews, or creating multi-previews, I'm ahead of myself, then you can easily filter them out in the menu. Great thing. Speaking about multi-previews, that's where I got ahead of myself. That's the thing. We can combine these preview annotations into a more compact form and more reusable form. Going back to our example, we now have 4 previews, and we could have much, much more. We have these primary ones. We have these secondary ones that we can actually compress. Again, I was ahead of myself. So we can compress the primary ones into an annotation by annotating another annotation with them, a new annotation class that we define. It's called preview primary background, which collects the primary background variants into one annotation. We have another one for the secondary, which is called preview secondary background. And if we slap those 2 new annotations on our preview function, we get pretty much the same result, the 2 sets of previews rendered there. The fun thing is that we can combine multi-previews into multi-previews, so we can actually do this and annotate our composable with that new annotation. And we have a whole lot of reusable previews to share with our colleagues in our code base. Of course, this is good, because if all of our previews look the same, we can share them, as I said, along our code base. So if you're a new joiner and you want to write a preview, you can just slap this one annotation on your newly created preview, and it will look the same. It will be able to render the same thing as all of the other composables in your project. Great stuff. There are also some multi-preview templates that we can use. These are predefined multi-preview annotations coming from the Android tooling. So let's go through them quickly. There is the preview light dark. That's pretty straightforward. We get a light and a dark mode preview. Of course, we can't add additional parameters to our multi-preview annotations, unfortunately. I mean, technically we could, but it's not allowed in the predefined ones. So yeah, we got those previews. Again, this is not too comfortable, but we will switch to light mode soon. There is preview font scale. And preview font scale incorporates a lot of font scale settings, font scale setting-based previews. And it's time to switch to light mode now, so you can see. Sorry for your eyes again. So yeah, with this, we got a lot of different text scales set up for our previews. So if you're into actually supporting multiple text sizes, this is a great thing to have. If you're supporting multiple screen sizes, though, there is also this preview screen sizes annotation built into the tooling library, so we can get a lot of different form factors rendered. Of course, these templates are actually open source. You can look at the implementation, copy stuff over them, and do the same with your own implementation. Cool thing. There is another one for really extreme supportists. Preview dynamic colors, and you can preview your composables if you support the dynamic colors feature of Material U. Yeah, it's homework if you want to look into that. Let's not talk about that now. The main thing is, as I said, this is bundled with the Android X Compose tooling. So great, out of the box, you can look at them, you can reuse them, you can get inspired by them, and so on and so forth. The sad thing is that even though you can write multi-preview annotations in the shared code base in Compose multi-platform, you can't add parameters to them, so those would be just more reviews of the same kind. But also, Fleet doesn't pick up the multi-preview annotations yet in the common code base. The good thing is that they added support recently to the Android part of the code base in a multi-platform project, so that pretty much renders the same in the Android source than in Android Studio, but in the common code base, it doesn't work yet. The next hint is, let's build some custom tools for our custom needs. Here's a new example. You don't have to parse this code. I'll show you how it looks. It's actually a simple primary button. Most of you probably have that anyway. So here's a light and dark preview of the button. Really simple primary button preview. We call the primary button composable there. We add parameters to it as they should be, and we get these. So what's wrong with this? We added the preview light dark annotation here, and we added the primary button here, and we should see two buttons, one with the light colors and one with the dark colors, right? Right? No, we shouldn't, because we're missing something. That button actually, in the internal implementation, which you shouldn't have to parse, relies on the theme being set. So that composable primary button should be called inside the app theme to have it properly set up the colors. So we forgot to add that to our previews. If we add it, of course, we get the proper two previews in light and dark mode, but the button implementation itself defaults to some default colors. Actually, it's not the button implementation underneath. It might be the color system setup, or it might be the button itself, and so on and so forth. Many things can happen, but usually we have to add the theme into composables. Oh, the previews, sorry. Also, Some other thing that we're missing here is, of course, flexibility, because we're using an annotation that doesn't work in the common code base in a multi-platform project. But let's push that away, and let's continue with the things that actually work everywhere. OK, so what we can do to mitigate this issue, because I don't know about you again, but I usually forget to call this theme there in the first place, like the first time I write a preview. It's so trivial, but we can also easily forget it. And also a lot of other things can go into previews that we could actually abstract away. So let's do something like this. Let's toy with this idea of having a composable that we only use in previews by convention. You can write lint rules, but yeah, by convention, let's call these things preview something, and let's add these, and let's use these in our previews. You'll see what I mean soon. Okay, this preview box here can be an implementation that adds the theme to our content instantly. But this wouldn't mean too much, right? Because we're switching up the theme, calling the theme with calling another composable, so we don't get too much things here, right? So let's go forward with the idea. Because we call it a box, we could just wrap our content with a box. And we could add more parameters to the parameter list of this preview box, like setting the background color. Why would we do that? Well, if we want to display another background color, or get a contrasty background color below our content, we could do this quite easily. Of course, we could do this in every preview that we want to write, but having it uniformly in our project as a convention might be beneficial in the long run. OK, so we add this. And we add a modifier to that box that wraps our content. We call the background there. And yeah, we can get the same result with some background color there. So we can get the contrast of the background and the foreground, how it looks in different backgrounds, and so on and so forth. Actually, there's a bug here as well, just for you to have some exercise, right, on reading something like this. Does anyone have an idea why this actually wouldn't render that on the preview? OK, I'll wait a couple of more seconds. OK, the thing is, what this exact code would render is two of the same preview, so two light stuff again. And that's because the background color there is instantly red if it's left for its default value. It's instantly red when the preview box is called. And it's not actually called in the apps theme. So it will default to some other color. For example, in material, it defaults to this purplish or bluish color. In our design system, it could default to the light theme. So that background secondary can be anything at that point. What we actually should do is to defer that reading for when it's actually called in the apps theme. So something like this. So if you're writing some tooling like this, consider that sometimes deferring the reading of a value might be beneficial, just as in normal compose in the normal compose daily routine when you're optimizing for recompositions. This has nothing to do with that, of course. OK. So what else can we do here? We could add some default padding around our content like this to have more of that contrast if you're looking for that. But you can add anything here, and we'll see some other options a bit later. Of course, if we create a box like this, nothing prevents us from creating other components to our likes. For example, like a preview column, because why not? If we want to display multiple things below each other and have some predefined structure to them, this could be a great thing. At Circuit, we had this idea after implementing the preview box and preview column and some other preview ideas to actually preview our dialogues, because well, we can do that. The previews are just normal composables. We can actually call Android View inside previews because there's a context, there's a, pretty much an Android runtime there, an Android UI runtime there in the previews. So why couldn't we do this? And actually, we could. So because our dialogues are made by factories, we can just, and we have a context in the previews, we can easily build our dialogues based on the context with our factories inside our previews. So we implemented this preview dialog helper that makes the, previewing our dialog content pretty easy in Compose previews. Of course, you could say that, well, you could do this in XML or whatnot, but yeah, the contents here in our app is actually made with composables. So all our dialogues are made with composables, but displayed by the dialog mechanism of Android. So yeah, we are just trying to keep our things in the Compose space, but this needs the Android view space in our environment as well. So like creating something like this actually works. So why not? And here comes that part when I said we could add anything pretty much there in these custom tools. So why not override composition locals then? Here's this small example, again, with this preview column, where we will add some content. And we could add, for example, the layout direction as a parameter there, so that we could easily preview our layouts in right to left and left to right situations. And of course, to use this, that's quite straightforward. You can utilize the composition local providers. You can override the composition local providers in your previews as well. So we could just override local layout direction with the parameter that's coming in as an argument for preview column. And if we actually add some content to this preview column, a button and a list item that we already seen, and we start parameterizing our preview column, this is the default value. It's just for show now. But yeah, the default is left to right. And we can easily switch that to right to left to see if everything's correct in the right to left layout mode. And the good thing with this approach is that currently it of course works with Android Studio and Jetpack Compose. But if you use the proper preview annotations that actually work in Fleet and Compose multi-platform shared code bases as well, then this also works with those. So awesome. Let's get to a topic that is actually really dear to me. Let's make previews interactive. And why is that important? Well, a bit of a side note. This is some part of our app, or our apps actually, Circuit Route Planner and Circuit for Teams. And we have a lot of micro animations going there. If you look at this video for a couple of seconds, you can see that everything is pretty much animated, not just the map, but every small movement, interaction is there. And this means there are a lot of actual DP-based and size-based animations and visibility animations working in tandem to achieve this kind of UX. So it would be really hard to test these animations by running them all again and again. So what we did is we tried to make most of our previews actually interactive where it makes sense. When there is an animation, we are making that preview interactive to try to scroll through all the states that are animated. You'll see some examples of some exact things like that. OK, we recently implemented that floating pin over the map that you could see on the video, which moves up and down based on if the map is moving or not. It's called floating pin map overlay because we didn't have much fantasy for it. And it receives the state if it's lifted or not. And that's it. So because the code is quite large, let's just say that there's some beautifully animated content there. But the static preview pretty much looks like this. It's nothing fancy. But if we write some interactive preview tooling to it, we can make it actually, we can actually see how it will be animated on the map as well. How to make a preview interactable or interactive? Well, we can set up state inside our previews and set up our fake callbacks, like click callbacks, or even add some not required callbacks to modify that state and feed that state to our composable under preview. For example, this is lifted can be just a mutable state of Boolean in our preview. We can create a clickable on the whole preview box, because why not? Where we flip that state, and we can feed that state into our composable under preview to achieve something like this in Android Studio. Of course, this doesn't work yet in Fleet, because Fleet doesn't render the composables in a runtime. They render it statically as an image. But it works, and we can see what will happen if we move the map. So cool. I brought you another preview that we have. This is the rest of the tooling over our map, the rest of the UI elements and overlays over our map. And as you can see, there are a lot of animations happening based on which state the map or the user or the app is. So yeah, just making this interactive preview with all the separate states that it can be in actually made sense for us to see how the whole thing interacts by feeding the states one after another to this layout. OK, and as I said, interactive previews work with Jetpack Compose and Android Studio, quite straightforward. But unfortunately, as Fleet only renders things in static images, this is not a thing that we can do yet in our shared code base. I brought you some more ideas, which we don't have more time to actually discuss, just touching them. We can use our previews to get some preliminary accessibility checks done. If you want to, spend time on actually making your app accessible, you can do this preliminary accessibility check feature. You can run that on your screens or your exact composables, and you can get some hints on what might be going wrong accessibility-wise with your layouts. And you can then go to your designer who actually knows more about accessibility, maybe if you're not that person who does that, and just talk with them that we have these issues in the design. And they might be aware of it anyway. Okay, we can also generate previews with preview parameter providers. And there is a great article about actually providing composables as preview parameters with preview parameter providers. And I got many questions about that, why that would be beneficial. Well, let's say you're implementing a layout composable, a custom layout that needs to work in tandem with a lot of other composables that it has to lay out. So you might want to provide those custom composables as preview parameters to test if your layout actually does what it has to. And that's a great thing to have. Also, you can use previews to build a component showcase if you're building a design system, if you're sharing components with iOS folks or with desktop apps or with web or whatever. Building a component showcase might be a great thing. You can do it manually, or you can use some of the libraries out there already, like Showcase, to do your thing. You can use previews for screenshot testing, of course, because those are pretty much rendered images if you're not counting the interactive part. And there is a library that's kind of in works. It didn't get any love in the last couple of months, so we don't know how this looks, actually. But you can just scratch that and use one of the third-party tools that are out there that does the thing that that first-party tool should be doing. Or you can just make your whole app runnable in preview, because why not? There is this great article that explains how providing fake view models and fake use cases in previews in an app that is based on Compose navigation can lead you to actually running the whole app and every app flow that you have in the app in preview. So basically having a mock app in the preview that's running from start to finish. And that's just awesome that we can do that in Android Studio in the preview without launching an emulator, of course, or running it on a device. So with that, let's wrap up the things. We saw a lot of things here. We can do a lot of things with the previews. We can write a lot of code to make these preview-based things work. But yeah, you might have the question, is it worth the effort going that deep into previews? And the answer to that is, of course, it depends. Because if your team needs to communicate through previews, like in PR reviews, for example, what is implemented, what's not, what's happening in the code, you can easily visualize that with, if you're building, for example, components or just the UI part of the screens, with the previews, even if you don't have the logic beneath them. Or you can make these interactive if it makes your communication more effective with the teammates. So yeah, it really depends on how deep you want to go and how much resources do you have while doing it. Okay, here are some resources I used to make this talk. You can check them out on my website, or if you scan the QR code, that's the same thing. But yeah, here they are. And with that, grazie per l'attenzione. I just used up all my Italian budget now. So if you have any questions, we might have some time, but I'll be here all day. So just find me if you have anything to talk about. Thank you.